Hello, welcome to Level Change channel. My name is Claudio Fonseca. I'm a real world 777 pilot, and this is the first video of 2025. Today I would like to talk about main deck cargo fire. I prepared a couple of things to discuss on this video, and before recording this video I made a test on the 777 by PMDG, and I realized that the checklist we have into this PMDG is an old checklist by Boeing. Okay, so you can follow this checklist. It's not a big deal. You are going to comply with the procedures, at least the procedures that are going to help you to perform a safe landing on the sim. But a few years ago, Boeing changed the procedure, changed the checklist itself, and I'm going to show you today this new checklist, how to perform the checklist. And as we do not have the new checklist in the electronic version, I'm also going to show you how to manage a paper checklist on the 777, because once you start working with the electronic checklist, you will see that a couple of things happens automatically on the airplane, especially when it's related to the ICAS indications. Okay, so what kind of checklist you need to do, what kind of checklist you don't have to do, it's all automatically handled by the airplane, removing the checklist that you do not have to do. And on the paper checklist, there is a statement on the checklist telling you what checklist or which checklist you are not supposed to do, because the failure you are dealing is causing these other issues to the airplane. Okay, so I prepared a different scenario, a different view here for us to discuss this main deck cargo fire. And also I would like to tell you that the maneuver that we are going to perform today, it's really helpful even to airplanes that are not cargo airplanes. So if you stay tuned on this video, I will show you how to do the expedite descent for freighter airplanes, and that shows the capability of the 777 and how you can expedite your descent and how fast you can be on approach and still be configured for landing within some limits. Okay, so for this today I'm going to start with the procedures. So let's go to this camera here. So what we have today is the fire cargo main deck. This is the ICAS indication that we are going to have on the airplane, and you are going to see on the left side always, or during most part of the video, the checklist itself. Of course, I will bring this checklist bigger as we talk about the checklist itself, but as a reference, you will have the checklist on your left side. Of course, if you are watching this video on your mobile, you will have to zoom in to see what is written on the checklist, but if you are watching it on a big screen, you will be able to read the checklist even when the checklist is small like this. Okay, so first thing that I want to tell you is something related to the system. Okay, so let me show you a couple of system information that we have from the flight crew operations manual. So related to main deck cargo fire, we have a couple of things, and we are interested today on number 4 and number 5, basically on the switches related to main deck. They are similar to lower forward and lower aft. Okay, so when you arm the switches for the lower aft, the lower forward, or the main deck, the one that we are going to discuss today, when you do it, it turns off both recirculation fans, it turns off lavatory and galley vent fans, it turns off cargo heat, in the respective compartment. In this case, we are talking about main deck. Also turns off electrical power outlets in the respective compartment and command packs to supply air to the flight deck and supernumerary areas only. Okay, so this is very important. And turn off nitrogen generation system. For the main deck, and then only for the main deck, it also commands the electronic equipment cooling to provide pack air to flight deck equipment. Turn off main deck cargo compartment airflow, and turn off aft cargo conditioning supply and exhaust. For some airplanes, it also inhibits lower cargo compartment fire warning. Okay, this is not to all airplanes. It depends on the configuration that you have. Nowadays, most of the airplanes, they also inhibits. Okay, so this inhibit for lower cargo compartment fire warnings is true for most of the new airplanes. I'm not sure if it's true for the PMDG, because what it seems is that PMDG is still using an old version and old data for the airplane. Okay, you also have the cargo fire warning light, is the red light that is going to indicate main deck cargo fire, and of course it illuminates during the fire overheat test, and also when cargo compartment smoke is detected. Okay, so what we have for the main deck is a smoke detector. Actually, we have some 8 zones, so 8 zones for smoke detectors, and if any of these 8 zones detect smoke in the main deck compartment, we are going to have the main deck cargo fire indication. Okay, what happened is, because the main deck is continuous to the airplane supernumerary area and the cockpit, and it's not an isolated compartment as the lower cargo compartments, we do not have any kind of fire extinguisher to this cargo fire. What we have is a system to depressurize the airplane, and then by having less oxygen, because we are with the airplane pretty much depressurized, we are hoping that there is not enough oxygen to burn all the cargo or much of the cargo, or at least is going to suppress the fire for a little bit, and is going to able the pilots to land this airplane. Okay, so basically that's what we have. If you do not have the checklist itself, you arm the main deck cargo fire compartment, and then you press the depressurization and or discharge. Once you press with the main deck cargo fire switch armed, you are going to depressurize the airplane, and that's basically the procedure that you have to do. Okay, so related to the system, you arm and then you press the depressurization switch to depressurize the airplane. One more time, you can follow the PMDG checklist. This NO checklist is going to look quite well on your Microsoft Flight Simulator, but for the real airplane is a little bit different, and I'm going to show you now how is this checklist. Okay, so this is the actual checklist that we have by Boeing. Okay, so fire cargo main deck, that is a condition. Smoke is detected in the main deck cargo compartment. So remember, we do not have any indication for an actual fire. We have an indication for the smoke. Usually smoke is sign of fire. That's why you have fire cargo main deck enunciated on your ICAS. Okay, another thing, of course, you can always check the main deck temperature, and most probably if you have a fire, this temperature is going to increase. Okay, so it's something to keep an eye as well, but you are not going to do any assessment based on the temperature, at least initially. Okay, the objective of this checklist is to suppress the fire and to land as soon as possible. Okay, note that it doesn't do any kind of troubleshooting to realize and to verify if this indication is true or not. When it's related to fire, we take it as a true indication and we land as soon as possible and the flight is over. Okay, so first thing that we have to understand when we are dealing with the fire cargo main deck is that this is not a memory item, which means the pilots they have to open the checklist and follow the checklist step by step. And this is very important, especially on this one, because if you just do the first, or if you just press the two buttons that we have in the overhead panel to arm the main deck cargo fire and depressurize the airplane, you are going to have the airplane depressurized, and of course you don't want to be in a depressurized airplane if you are not protected with your oxygen, and especially if the other people on board, like the supernumeraries, the people that are taking care of the animals that you may be transporting, or any other person that is on this flight, also they need to be on oxygen. So you do it as the checklist says, so you protect yourself first and then you deal with the problem. Okay, so note that the first action of this is don oxygen mask and smoke goggles. Okay, so I will tell you that before doing this, if you do not have any kind of smoke or fire already in the cockpit or coming to the cockpit, and you know by heart this procedure, you know that you have to go down and land. So basically you keep flying. It's a good idea already to call Mayday and tell ATC that you need to descend. Okay, this need to descend to land immediately, it depends on how far you are from the airport, and we are going to see it really soon. Okay, so remember that while you were dealing with the situation, you still have to fly the airplane, preferably land as soon as possible, or initiate the descent, the initial descent, as soon as possible. So talk to ATC, this is very important. Okay, so fly, navigate, communicate with ATC. Okay, then once you start the checklist, you don the oxygen masks and smoke goggles. You establish crew communication, so you make sure the pilots they can hear each other, and then the checklist will tell you to choose one option, if you are on the ground or if you are in flight. If you are on the ground, there's not much you can do. There is no extinguish, there's no anything that you can do on the airplane to extinguish this fire. Okay, so basically you just confirm that you have this fire. There is a warning to inform ground personnel not to open any cargo door until all supernumeraries and crew have exited the airplane and firefighting equipment is nearby. So basically, you go off the airplane, you take everybody with you, you do not open any door, and then the firefighters will take care of this airplane. Okay, but we are talking today about an in-flight situation. Okay, and then the number 4 on this checklist is telling you to push to on and hold for 1 second the supernumerary oxygen switch. This is going to give other people on board also the oxygen. Okay, so the oxygen masks, they will drop. So now at this point we have the pilots with the oxygen mask and the smoke goggles, and also the rest of the people on board also with the oxygen mask. The next step is to push the main deck alert switch, because if you have somebody on the main deck, this person needs to be informed, and this person needs to come back to the supernumerary area and use the oxygen mask. Okay, there is a note here on the airplane. If the airplane senses this smoke and triggers the fire cargo main deck, this alert goes automatic. Okay, what we are doing now is helping the system. If something goes wrong with the automatic system, we make sure that this person is informed. Okay, and maybe if you are doing this checklist without a smoke indication, but you know that there is fire on board because somebody told you, so this is very important as well, because this is the first alert for the people that are inside the main deck cargo that the airplane is going to be depressurized and they need to come back to the front and use their oxygen mask. Okay, so once you alert the people back there, the next step is main deck cargo fire switch. You confirm, both pilots, they have to confirm this switch to make sure the pilot monitoring is pushing the correct one, and then you push the switch to the arm position. The next step is cargo fire, the pressurization and discharge switch. You push and hold it for 1 second to start the pressurizing this airplane. Okay. Then the next step is plan to land at the nearest suitable airport. Okay, so what it means, plan to land at the nearest suitable airport. Let's see what Boeing states about land at nearest suitable airport. If we go to the key range, you will see that land at nearest suitable airport, Boeing says that there are some situations where the flight crew must land at the nearest suitable airport. These situations include, but are not limited to, the conditions where the non-normal checklist includes the item plan to land at the nearest suitable airport. Okay, which is the case for our checklist. So number 8 says plan to land at nearest suitable airport. So if it says that, what Boeing wants from you, there are other 3 situations where you need to land at nearest suitable airport, but for this one it is because it is included in the checklist. Okay, also the second one is also valid for this case. We have fire or smoke that continues. Okay, but what is landing at nearest suitable airport? And then the Boeing flight crew training manual states that this is a phrase used in the quick reference handbook, and the section below explain the basis for that statement and how it is applied. In a non-normal situation, the pilot in command, having the authority and responsibility for operation and safety of the flight, must make the decision to continue the flight as planned or divert. In emergency situation, this authority may include necessary deviations from any regulations to meet the emergency. In all cases, the pilot in command is expected to take a safe course of action. The Quick Reference Handbook assists flight crew in the decision-making process by indicating those situations where landing at the nearest suitable airport is required, which is the case today. These situations are described in the checklist instructions or the individual non-normal checklist. That's the one that we have. Okay, so checklist instructions is what you have on top, those 4 situations. One of the situation is the individual non-normal checklist, which is the case today. The next paragraph specifically talks about engine failure and say that the regulations are specific. We are not going to talk about engine failure today. And then on the other side, Boeing also continues. A suitable airport is defined by the operating authority for the operator based on guidance material, but in general must have adequate facilities and meet certain minimum weather and field conditions. So basically here Boeing is telling us that we need to be, or to check pretty much if we can land at their airport due to the facilities there, the weather and also the runway. Okay, so if you have people to help you on ground, if you have weather good enough for you to land, and if that runway is adequate for you. And by adequate, I'm telling you that you have the runway long enough for your landing and your actual weight, your actual speeds, and also if that runway will support the weight that you are using at that specific time. If required to divert to the nearest suitable airport, the guidance material typically specifies that the pilot should select the nearest suitable airport in point of time or in terms of time. In selecting the nearest suitable airport, the pilot in command should consider the suitability of nearby airports in terms of facilities and weather and their proximity to the airplane position. So basically, you have a couple of airports around you usually, and then you need to know which one is the best for you and which one have weather issues or not that can prevent or not your land, and also of course the proximity to the airplane position. The pilot in command may determine, based on the nature of the situation and an examination of the relevant factors, that the safest course of action is to divert to a more distant airport than the nearest airport. And then Boeing gives us a very good example. There is not necessarily a requirement to spiral down to the airport nearest to the airplane's present position if, in the judgment of the pilot in command, it would require equal or less time to continue to another nearby airport. Okay, so this is important. Let's say that you are flying over Europe, and right now you are over Frankfurt Hahn Airport. Okay, so this is basically an airport with a lot of cargo operation, but it's not the main airport in Frankfurt, and you have Frankfurt main airport close by. If you are cruising at 35,000 feet, it doesn't matter which airport you choose, you will take the same time to reach the ground, because you need more time to come down than you need to reach the airport itself. So both airports, they would be reachable by the time you are descending from your cruise level until your landing. So both airports you will take the same time, so you do not need to go spiraling all the way down to the airport that you are overheading if there is another airport maybe 20, 40, 50, 60 miles from you. So it all depends on the situation. Of course, if you are far away from the airports, then you take the nearest one that can accommodate your landing. Also, Boeing says, for persistent smoke or a fire which cannot positively be confirmed to be completely extinguished, the safest course of action typically requires the earliest possible descent, landing, and evacuation. This may dictate landing at the nearest airport appropriate for the airplane type, rather than at the nearest suitable airport normally used for the route segment where the incident occurs. What does that mean? Let me give you one example. Let's say that you are flying in South America, and you are in the Amazon forest. Okay, you are overflying the Amazon forest right now, and then let's say you have a medical emergency. Okay, so basically for a medical emergency, someone that needs help right now, you still have to land as soon as possible. Okay, but if you go to any airport, maybe you will not have enough facilities, and by facilities I even mean stairs available to deplane this passenger. So maybe the closest airport is not the one adequate for your landing, because you don't want to be on the ground and then be unable to deplane this person that is requiring medical assistance. Okay, so you need to know that the airport you are going is capable of parking your airplane and also give you some sort of access to this airplane, and also you need paramedics to help this passenger or this crew, this person in this case, and or you need an ambulance to take this person to the hospital, depending on the situation. Okay, but if you are on fire, you don't really care about stairs, about the hospitals that you have around that airport, because what you want is to land as soon as possible. So maybe you are going to land at any airport that you find in the middle of the Amazon forest, that the runway is enough for you to stop the airplane, something like that. Okay, so depending on the situation, you may go to what Boeing calls suitable airport, and if it's really bad, for example, a smoke or fire with that continues, maybe you need to go to an appropriate airport for your airplane type and not a suitable airport. Then you are not thinking about everything else that is involved into the situation, because you just want to land this airplane. Okay, that is another thing. And then I go to number 9 on the checklist, that states, if the fire situation becomes uncontrollable, consider an immediate landing. And then let's see what Boeing tells us about immediate landing. What is immediate landing? Immediate landing, it must be stressed that for smoke that continues or a fire that cannot be positively confirmed to be completely extinguished, the earliest possible descent, landing, and evacuation must be done. So it's not very different from the previous one. However, if a smoke, fire, or fume situation becomes uncontrollable, which is the case, this is what the checklist is telling you, if this becomes uncontrollable, the flight crew would consider an immediate landing. And then Boeing says immediate landing implies immediate diversion to a runway, any runway. Okay, so any runway, anywhere you can land your airplane, you don't care about anything else. Okay, however, in a severe situation, the flight crew should consider an overweight landing. So you are not dumping fuel, you are not burning fuel if it's getting really bad. If the situation is becoming uncontrollable, you land at your current weight. You do a tailwind landing. You don't care about landing about the wind for your landing. Okay, if it's down the runway or up the runway, you don't care. Okay, if it's a headwind, if it's a tailwind, you just land, you go to the nearest threshold as possible. Okay, you also consider an off-airport landing. Yes, you may consider to land anywhere else you think you can at least bring the airplane to a halt, to a complete stop somehow. Okay, or a ditching, which is an off-airport landing on the water. Okay, so this is an extreme situation, but Boeing is pretty much telling you that if you have a fire and you cannot control the fire, maybe it's going to be better for you to land even outside an airport, in a road, in the middle of the desert, in the forest, in the river, in the sea, than to continue this flight, because maybe the fire will burn the airplane completely or will burn your flight controls. And remember, the 777 is a fly-by-wire airplane, so once you start losing the connection between the computers and the flight control surfaces, you are done. You do not have much. Okay, the history shows that if you cannot control the fire, usually the situation is uncontrollable in around 15 minutes, 15 minutes. Okay, so depending where you are in the world, if you have a situation like this, you may really need just go down and make an off airport landing, or even to ditch if you are in the middle of the ocean. Okay, so consider this. This is not myself telling you. This is the Fire Cargo Main Deck checklist on item number 9. Then it states, distance in the following steps: assume airport elevation at sea level and no wind. Adjust the distance for actual conditions. Then if you continue this checklist, it's going to ask you, the distance to the nearest suitable airport is 60 miles or less. Then it's telling you, you start an expedited descent, uninterrupted descent to the lowest safe altitude, or 3,000 feet above the field elevation, whichever is higher. Okay, so if you can go down to 3,000, you go down to 3,000. If the safe altitude is higher than this, you go to the safest altitude. Of course, you don't want to hit any terrain as well. Okay, but if you are more than 60 miles, you do this expedite descent, or you climb to 25,000 feet. Okay, you do this when condition and terrain allow, because if you are close to the Himalayas, you cannot go down to 25,000. You need to keep your current altitude until you clear the terrain, and then you go down to 25,000. Another thing that is important, if you are below 25,000 but more than 60 miles from the airport, you keep climbing and you expedite this climb to 25,000. Okay, so basically you have to go down or you have to go up to 25,000. Okay, we are going to understand why 25,000 really soon. Then it says, plan to stay at 25,000 until approximately 60 miles from the runway. Okay, this is not from the airport, it's from the runway. So at this point is already good if you have your route on your FMC, so you can check when you are 60 miles to touchdown, and then at approximately 60 miles from the runway, you start an expedited uninterrupted descent one more time to the lowest safe altitude, or 3,000 feet, whichever is higher, 3,000 feet above airport elevation. Okay, in both cases, when you are going down, you descend at your maximum speed with the speed brake extended. Okay, and the checklist tells you to maintain this speed, maximum speed, until 15 miles from the runway. Okay, so this is where it comes from my statement in the beginning of the video. This is for you to understand the capabilities of this airplane as well, because Boeing is telling you that you are at 3,000 feet, 15 miles to the runway at maximum speed, and you still can land this airplane. Okay, so this is good for you to understand how fast the airplane can decelerate, and how you can complete your landing in this situation. Okay, however, Boeing tells you plan to level off 15 miles from the runway. Okay, so if you are descending on this 60, you start this descent from 60 miles to your landing, and you are using your maximum speed with a speed brake extended, then you start judging your speed brake to be level around 15 miles from the runway. Okay, so if you are descending really fast in terms of rate of descent, because you have a big headwind, you can even think about retracting your speed brake. If you have a tailwind, maybe you will need that speed brake all the way down. Okay, next step, and then we are on number 14. Do not delay the approach and landing. So Boeing is telling you one more time, you have to land. Okay, you are not thinking about your weight, you are not thinking about your stabilization criteria. that much. You are not thinking about if the other people on board, they are seated or they are not. You need to land. Of course, if you can have everybody accommodated before landing is even better, but you do not delay your approach and landing. You just keep going, okay? Of course, this is a mayday situation on your contact with ATC. Even from the time you started this checklist, you give them a mayday call, and then of course you just go direct to the airport and you follow this procedure. Another step here, and now we are on 15, is auto brake selector. Boeing is telling you nowadays to select maximum auto. This was not part of the previous checklist, but the new checklist tells you to use maximum automatic brakes. Okay, we are going to talk about it as well later on. And then on number 16 it says, do not accomplish the following checklist: cabin altitude and pack right. This is important when you are doing the checklist on the paper, because if you did not open the fire cargo main deck checklist, the ICAS will tell you that you have to do cabin altitude checklist and you also have to do pack right checklist, because first, when you start pressurizing the airplane, the cabin altitude is going to climb, and then this checklist will pop up as well. And at the same time, when you press that button, the right pack will be turned off automatically by the system, and then the checklist for the pack right is also going to show. Okay, so if you are doing this, if you are descending out towards this 15 miles to the runway, you still have to do your descent checklist, which states for the recall, the notes, the auto brake, remember in maximum maximum automatic. Then you also have to keep flying. You need to know your approach speed, and you need to know your minimas. Remember, you still have to fly this airplane, and then you have to have your approach briefing completed. Next step, as you are on the approach, once you have your altimeter set, and I recommend you to do this as soon as possible, you do the approach checklist. The same warning when you are on the ground, you have it here again, and maybe you can tell ATC to advise everybody that is going to get close to this airplane not to open any cargo door after landing until all people have exited the airplane and the firefighting equipment is nearby. Then when you are approximately 50 miles from the runway, Boeing tells you extend the speed brake, reduce the speed, and configure for landing. Retract the speed brake as needed. And then you do the landing checklist, checking for the speed brake, landing gear, and the flaps. Okay, we are going to do this really soon. But before we go there, I want to show you this expedited descent for freighter airplanes. Okay, so this is coming from Boeing, and I'm going to show you a couple of things. Okay, so this is the 777 and the 787 flight crew training manual. Okay, so these sections describe general technique associated with accomplishing the fire cargo main deck checklist. Okay, so this is Boeing tell you how to maneuver this airplane while you are doing this checklist. Okay, first thing that Boeing says is that this expedited descent is a separate and different maneuver from the rapid descent. Okay, they are two different maneuvers. The rapid descent is designed to bring the airplane down smoothly to a safe altitude. Okay, so this is not what we are doing today. We are not bringing the airplane down to a safe altitude. Okay, the expedited descent maneuver is designed to maintain flight level 250 as long as possible. This is the important thing. And then the descent from flight level 250 is only started when an expedited uninterrupted descent to the lowest safe altitude, or 3,000 feet above field elevation at maximum speed, can be accomplished. Okay, so the difference here is on the rapid descent you go to 10,000 feet or the lowest safe altitude. On this one you descend to 25,000 and you stay there until you start descent to the lowest safe altitude, or 3,000 feet. and you maintain maximum speed all the way down to 3,000 feet, okay? For the emergency descent, usually when you are approaching 10,000 feet, around 12,000 feet, you are going to start reducing your airspeed to something around 300 knots, and once you are 1,000 feet to level off, around 11,000 feet, you stall the speed brake, okay? This is different. On the one that we are doing today, we stay at 25,000, and once we go down, we keep maximum speed until we are at 15 miles from the runway. Why we do this? Because this shortened flight time below flight level 250, to me, what is the reason why we do it? Okay, my mouse just stopped working. Let's see if we can figure out. Yeah, it's here. We do it to minimize the severity of the fire in an oxygen-rich environment. Okay, so what we want to do now is to reduce the amount of oxygen that we have for the fire. Intermediate level off below 250 and extended flight at low airspeeds are avoided. Okay, so this is different from the rapid descent. This is the expedited descent. There is no fire extinguish capability for main deck cargo compartment fires, as I told you before. Fire protection for this type of compartment requires isolating the fire and reducing the amount of oxygen available to the fire. Arming the main deck cargo firearm switch shut down ventilation sources and protects the occupied areas of the airplane from hazardous quantity of smoke. That's why the airplane is going to turn off all the ventilation system and the right pack, and we still be using the left pack in a low flow mode to keep the cockpit and the supernumerary area with slightly differential pressure from the main deck cargo compartment, which is going to protect you from the smoke. We'll try to avoid bringing the smoke into the cockpit. Pushing the cargo fire depressurization discharge switch depressurizes the airplane and reduces the amount of oxygen available to the fire. Okay, that's what we want to do. Reduce the amount of oxygen available to the fire. That's why we maintain flight level 250. So Boeing says that maintaining flight level 250 as long as practicable minimize oxygen available to the fire while accommodating flight crew physiological limits for extended flight on supplementary oxygen. Okay, so what Boeing is telling us is at flight level 250 with the airplane almost depressurized, it's going to be very cold at 250, but at this level it is enough to keep the crew alive. Okay, so you cannot maintain flight level 360, 37, 38, 39, 41 because the temperature will be so low at this level that you will freeze. So you go down to 250, it's still low, the temperature is not comfortable, but you can keep yourself at flight level 250 for longer than if you were higher. Okay, so this is an average of low oxygen for the fire and also maintaining the crew alive. Also at flight level 250 you have a good forward speed. Of course that will depend on the wind that you have, but at flight level 250 you can maintain 330 knots or something like that, even more than this, I think around 340 knots. So you are going forward faster. Okay, then your descent. How is your descent? Proper descent planning is required to ensure the airplane arrives at the lowest safe altitude or 3,000 feet above field elevation in the shortest time. The checklist provides an approximate distance from airport at sea level in track miles to begin the descent from flight level 250. If you remember, 60 miles, okay? Do not delay the approach and landing once descent is started. The checklist provides an approximate distance from the airport to begin decelerating for the approach and landing as well, and if you remember, this distance is 15 miles. Distance must be adjusted for actual conditions such as headwind or tailwind, thrust requirements for anti-ice, or an airport elevation other than sea level, okay? I have to tell you that 15 miles and 60 miles, it's very conservative, okay? If you have a tailwind, unless it's a really strong tailwind, most probably you will be able to do it within the 60 miles and within the 15 miles. But have in mind that you have a tailwind, you may need to start your descent slightly early, okay? What I see is that if you have headwind, that affects you much more, and you do not want to descend much, especially when you are getting close to 3,000 feet, because you still want to go as fast as possible to reach your runway and land as soon as possible. Then Boeing create 3 nodes here. The first one is creating 2 fixes and entering the distance on the bearing distance lines on the FMC fix info page. One to mark the descent from flight level 250 and the other to mark the deceleration point, may assist in situational awareness and planning. I'm going to do that with you. Use of autopilot, auto throttle, and flight level change mode. Not because this is flight level change channel. This is because this is the recommended to protect airspeed and altitude and reduce crew workload for the expedited descent. Use of vertical speed mode is not recommended, and VNAV is not available because you are descending out of the VNAV calculations. So use flight level change. The use of auto brake is recommended because auto brake provides symmetrical braking and quicker application upon touchdown. However, when used properly, maximum manual braking provides the shortest stopping distance. So, if it's really bad, you can even use maximum manual brakes once you are on the ground, because you want to stop this airplane, and if it's really bad, you want to evacuate. So you want to stop this airplane as soon as possible. Usually, you do not see much difference between maximum automatic and maximum manual braking. So if it's not life-threatening at that stage, I do recommend to keep the auto brake. The auto brake stops the airplane, and then you think from this point. How is your approach? Precise approach planning is required to ensure the airplane is stabilized on final approach in the landing configuration and to avoid a go-around. I want to tell you something else. Most of the companies require the airplane to be stable at 1,000 feet for the approach. You are not going to go around if you are not stable by 1,000 feet. If you can be stable at 800, 600, 500, the cutoff altitude, I don't really know. But most probably, if it's still safe to continue, even though you are not configured and fully established to 1,000, maybe it's a good idea to complete your approach and landing, okay? Of course, you need to think more in this case. You need to understand if it's safe enough, and then of course if it's not safe to continue your landing, you go around and you come back again, you try to do it again. But try to do your best on the first approach, because this may save the life of everybody on board. Approaching level of altitude of 3,000 feet above field elevation or higher as appropriate. Boeing tells you to retract the speed brakes before adding thrust. You don't want to be with thrust and speed brake at the same time. Retract speed brakes smoothly while maintaining the selected speed. So it's very important. You are maintaining maximum speed. So you want to retract your speed brake smoothly. Otherwise, you are going to enter into overspeed. It's not a big deal. You are in emergency. You still have to land. But if you can avoid it, you avoid it. Then at 50 miles from the runway, note what Boeing says. You set the MCP speed to approach speed and immediately extend the speed brakes. Okay, why you do this? Because this prevents autothrottle advancement and provides the shortest time to configure. Remember, you are 50 miles from the runway at maximum speed for your airplane. So Boeing is telling you, select the lower speed that you are going to have today, which is your approach speed, and extend the speed brake. Okay, because you do not want to reduce to 250 and then to flap up speed and then to flap 1 speed and then to flap 5 speed. You reduce all the way to your approach speed. Upon reaching flaps up speed, retract the speed brakes. Okay, so basically the speed brake is going to be used while you do not have the flaps. Then you start extending the flaps and landing gear on schedule as you do in a normal flight. Flap 1, flaps 5, gear down, flaps 20, flaps 30. Plan normal approach and landing. If circumstances dictate the use of speed brake with flaps extended, high sink rates during the approach should be avoided. How you are going to avoid this? Fly unstable approach using your VNAV in this case, because now you are already down going to the runway, or using the approach mode. We are going to see this even later on. When thrust requirements for anti-ice results in less than normal descent rates with the speed brake extended, slowing sooner than 50 miles from the runway and extending the landing gear sooner than in the normal configuration sequence may be accomplished. So Boeing is telling you, if for some reason you are not descending or you are not reducing as expected, you always have the option to extend your landing gear before you have flaps 5. So before you select gear down flaps 20, you can start from gear down even before the flaps. Of course, you need to be below 270 knots on the 777 to extend the flaps, but that's the maximum speed. Anything below that, you can extend your flaps, your landing gear. And if you really need, you can also use your speed brake even with the flaps. Okay, this is not what Boeing is telling you to do. In a normal situation, you use the speed brake until you reach flap up speed, and this is enough for you to configure the airplane. But if it's not, the speed brake is there, you still can use. Another note, the use of autopilot and autothrottle with the approach mode, of course if you have an ILS, is the recommended technique for the approach and landing. Use of vertical speed mode is not recommended. Okay, here of course if you do not have approach mode because you are doing an RNAV approach, you're going to use VNAV for this approach. Avoid using vertical speed because this is what increases your workload a lot. Okay, and to finish this before we go to the airplane, there is a nice picture from Boeing here. Okay, so you are going to descend, level off at 250. So you descend, level off at 250. When you are 60 miles to the runway, okay, at this point, you extend the speed brakes, you descend at maximum speed to the lowest safe altitude or 3000 feet, whichever is higher. This is your descent. Okay, then at some point, when you are approaching 3000 feet, you retract the speed brakes and you maintain VMO, MMO. If you have a lot of headwind on your descent, you may even start retracting your speed brake earlier. Then when you are at this point, which is around 15 miles from the airport, here it says the airport, but it's from your intended runway, you slow to approach speed, you extend the speed brakes. Okay, then at this point, when you reach your flap up speed, you retract the speed brake, you will be intercepting the final if you are at 3000 feet, and then you extend flaps and gear on schedule and you complete your landing. Okay, so this is the expedited descent maneuver for the 777, and we are going to do it soon. Okay, so one more time, this is the checklist. We are going to follow this checklist. We are not going to follow the airplane checklist because it's the old checklist, and I'm going to go step by step with you now. Okay, you still have the checklist on the left side, so we can go to the airplane. I'm going to also give you the simulator sound. That is one thing with the simulator. Once the cabin altitude reaches 10,000 feet, even canceling the master warning does not cancel the sound, does not cancel the aural sound for the decompression. I don't know why on the real airplane you cancel master warning, the sound goes off. I don't know why it's not going off on the 777 here by PMDG. Something that they have to figure out for the next updates. Okay, so there you go, you have the airplane. So we are close to Keflavik in Iceland. Okay, so to facilitate this, we are going to go to Keflavik, a place where we do not have much terrain around. Let's say that we are crossing the ocean. Oh, this was the pilot response. I'm just going to change here any heading and all the alerts are going to disappear. Okay, so basically tablet failed to load. I don't really know why, but on the other side is working. I'm not going to show you, but basically what we have for Keflavik, we are close to top of descent. It's an minimums of 335. So I'm going to select here 335 on the bottom. And we have pretty much everything set. We are close to our top of descent. We have our speed. Now it's already down to 147. We are with 153 tons at this stage. Everything is in place and we have Keflavik ahead of us. Okay, so you are flying here, and then what we have at some point is the main deck fire. Okay, before we start the procedure itself, I'm going to show you the indications that we have. Okay, so we have a master warning and fire cargo main deck. Here on PMDG, you are going to hear this sound for the fire warning from time to time, but on the real airplane it sounds continuously until you press any of the two master warning, and then the sound stops. Okay, the sound stops, but you still have the indication on the ACAS. The indication there is telling you that you have a checklist. Okay, you could open the checklist here, but that's not what we are going to do today, because we have a paper checklist to follow, the new checklist to follow. At this stage, if I see an indication like this, I'm going to tell ATC, Mayday, 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 PMDG 777, fire cargo on the main deck, descending to flight level 250. I'm already telling ATC what I'm going to do. Okay, and then I start the checklist. Okay, you do have the checklist on the left side, so usually the pilot monitoring will read the title, which states for, let me just open here, yeah, so fire cargo main deck checklist condition: smoke is detected in the main deck cargo compartment. Objective: to suppress the fire, to land as soon as possible. Down, oxygen mask and smoke goggles. Okay, so at this time, the captain here on the left side is going to take the oxygen mask. If the goggles, they are together with the oxygen mask, it's fine. Usually it is on the 777. If not, you will have here your smoke goggles as well. Also on the other side, the first officer is going to do the same. Then the pilot monitoring continues. Establish crew communications. Usually we say something, okay, this is the captain, I am on oxygen, and the first officer is going to say, yeah, this is the first officer, I am on oxygen as well. So we can hear each other, we establish crew communications. The next step is to choose that we are in flight and then we go to the supernumerary oxygen switch. We push and hold for 1 second. This is on the overhead panel. You go to supernumerary oxygen switch and you hold it to 1 for 1 second and you release. Okay, very important. You want to see this message, supernumerary oxygen on. So people in the back, people in the supernumerary area here, let me go all the way to the back, take this curtain. So people on this area here are going to have the oxygen masks dropping as well, and they can start to breathe as soon as you start depressurizing the airplane. Okay, one thing that I'm going to do now, I'm going to release the airplane because it's position freeze, so we are going to start flying ahead now. Next step for our checklist, it says main deck alert switch. We push so all the way down here, and this is the main deck alert switch. Okay, the main deck alert is already going on the cabin because we already have the main deck cargo fire indication, as you can see here. But to make sure it's working, we press the main deck alert, and this is going to flash the lights on the main deck compartment, so the people that is there, they know there's something wrong. They need to go back to the supernumerary area. Next step on the checklist is to find the main deck cargo firearm switch, confirm with both pilots, and push it. So usually the pilot monitoring is going to say cargo fire, main deck, and take the hand close to the switch. The other pilot will look up, will see the red light where the other pilot has the hand, and is going to say confirm. And then that other pilot that had the hand close by is going to press the switch, and the switch goes to the arm position. At this stage, a couple of things they happen. The right pack goes off automatically, and even if you look like to the air system right now, we are going to see that even the trim air is gone, and a couple of things happen to the airplane. We only have the left pack working, giving some but not much air to the cockpit and the supernumerary area. At this stage, we are going to see that the cabin altitude is supposed to start increasing. Okay, so this is supposed to depressurize the airplane really soon, actually, when we press the button, which is the next step of the checklist. Cargo fire depressurizing switch, push and hold for 1 second. Okay, so we go there, open the guard, and we press, and then we see the pressurization indication there. Okay, so at this stage we are going to see that the cabin rate starts to climb, and the cabin altitude is already at 5,300, and it's going to keep climbing. Okay, so this is what we have. Next step, plan to land at nearest suitable airport. Nearest suitable airport that we have right now is Keflavik, is our destination. We are already going there. If fire situation becomes uncontrollable, consider an immediate landing. An immediate landing in this case would mean ditching. Okay, we only have sea around us. We are going to the closest airport as possible. Okay, then we have the distance in the following steps: elevation, sea level, no wind, and then we are more than 60 miles, so we expedite a descent to 25,000 feet. So at this stage we change this to 1,000, we go down 250 on the altitude, level change, we increase our airspeed, maximum speed, 320 knots right now, and you use your speed brake. Okay, now we have cabin altitude, and as I told you, in the real airplane, if you cancel this warning, the sound goes off. Okay, so this sound that you are hearing for the cabin altitude is not continuous on the airplane once you cancel the auto warning, something that PMDG has to correct. Now we are going to keep increasing our speed to maximum, which is going to be 340 knots really soon. Okay, and then we continue with the checklist. Okay, we are descending to 25,000 feet until we are 60 miles to the runway. Okay, so we are reaching now. We can even then retract the speed brakes, and as we go down, I can select the runway now on fixed page, and I create two arcs. The first with 60 miles, that we are going to start our descent from 25,000, and the next one at 15 miles when we are going to start our deceleration. So now I already have my 60 miles arc there and my 15 miles arc there as well. Okay, so I'm maintaining now 250, 345 knots. That's maximum speed on the 777, and we are maintaining this. Okay, next step on the checklist is we descend at this speed until we are 15 miles from the runway. We do not delay the approach and landing, and we select the auto brake selector to maximum auto. So in this case, the auto brake was selected to 3. Now we need to select maximum auto to land and stop as soon as possible. Then the checklist states, do not accomplish the following checklist: cabin altitude and pack right. So cabin altitude we are not going to do, pack right we are not going to do, and the fire cargo main deck we are doing on the paper, so we can disregard these 3 indications for checklist here. And the supernumerary oxygen on, there is no checklist. Okay, so this is the importance of the do not accomplish the following checklist on the paper checklist. And then the next step is the descent checklist. I'm going to do the descent checklist also on the paper that states for recall, so we make sure we do a recall. We have checklist no normal, cabin altitude, fire deck main cargo, pack right, and supernumerary oxygen on. Okay, so everything related to our failure, not a big deal. We can cancel this. We can check notes. It says checklist no normal is not completed. We can cancel this one. For the notes, the only note that we have is to inform ground personnel not to open any cargo door after landing until everybody have exited the airplane and firefighting equipment is nearby. Next step, auto brake maximum. Landing data, we have VREF flaps 30 147, minimums barrel 335, and the approach briefing is complete. It's a straight in approach. We go straight into runway 01. Note that we have 65 knots headwind, so most probably on our descent we do not need that much speed brake. Most probably we are going to retract the speed brake sooner than closer to the 15 miles. Now we have another message. We still need to fly this airplane low fuel center, and then we can turn off the center fuel pumps. The message is gone. We continue, and then the descent checklist is also complete. Next step is the approach checklist, and then we are going to wait for the 15 miles. Now we are going, remember, if this is real life, I would also consider at this stage opening the air synoptic, noting the temperature on the main deck. If the fire is still there, if the fire is huge, this temperature is going to increase a lot, and this may be an indication for me that I need to do an immediate landing. I'm not continuing to the airport. At this stage, the system is still detecting smoke. I know that the system is still detecting smoke because the fire cargo main deck indication is still there. Okay, let's say that we are descending, or we are now maintaining flight level 250, and the actions that we did so far, they pretty much extinguished the fire. Of course, once we start the descent again, once we start to have oxygen again or more oxygen inside this airplane, there is a high chance that the fire will ignite again and we'll have the fire again. But if at this stage smoke is not sensed on the main deck cargo, we were going to have something like this. Only the cabin altitude indication, okay, and the sound will not be there. One more time, we will be able to cancel through the master warning, okay? But there is a high chance that the indication is still there and we are still doing the fire cargo main deck checklist. Note, now that we have a fire cargo main deck indication again, I was able even to cancel the cabin altitude warning with the master warning, like we do in real life. But remember, PMDG guys, if somebody is looking into this, you cannot cancel the cabin altitude warning if the auto warning is generated by cabin altitude checklist, okay? This is something that you have to figure out. So now we are waiting for the 60 miles. Wow, actually we are still freeze. We are not moving. I'm sorry guys. I didn't notice that we were still freezed at the same place. My mistake here. We were supposed to be approaching these 60 miles. I have an external application here, FSI panel, to control these things, and I forgot to release the airplane. Not a big deal, because you can have this issue at any point, and especially here over the North Atlantic, maybe you were really far away from the nearest suitable airport, which today is Keflavik. Okay, so we are supposed to be there at 12:24 and right now is 12:03, so in 21 minutes we were supposed to be landing. It's going to be slightly faster than this because we are going to fly at maximum speed. Okay, and there we go. At this stage we are below our profile, but we are going to keep this altitude until we are 60 miles from the runway. We have a huge amount of headwind here, so maybe one more time, we do not need the speed brake all the way down. Okay, so this is what we have, and I'm going to give you one more time the checklist, the big checklist, not only on the left side, for you to understand that we are already done our oxygen mask and smoke goggles. We established crew communications. We released the oxygen for the supernumerary. We alert people that may be in the main deck cargo to come back, and then we start depressurizing the airplane by selecting main deck cargo firearm switch to arm position and then pressing the cargo fire depressurization discharge switch. We have to land at the nearest suitable airport, which today is our destination anyway, and the situation is not uncontrollable. We do not have a huge amount, or the temperature is not rising that fast. We do not have smokes, and of course the pilots, they cannot leave the cockpit to check. But once you know that everything is under control, temperature is not increasing, maybe even the smoke detector is not sensing smoke anymore, you can understand that this fire is reducing or was successfully suppressed. For now, it may ignite later on, but for now it is okay. And that's the case. We are waiting now. Actually, we continued the checklist and we were more than 60 miles to the airport, so we expedite our descent to 25,000 feet. We stay at 25,000 feet. Now we are waiting for 60 miles to the runway. We do the descent at maximum speed. We plan to level off 15 miles from the runway. We do not delay our approach and landing. Auto brake is already in maximum auto. We know the checklist that we don't need to do. The descent checklist is complete. Waiting now for the approach checklist to set the altimeters, and then at 50 miles to configure the airplane and then perform our landing checklist. That's what we have now. So we are getting closer to the 60 miles. At any point, I can come here and use my progress page to note that we have 92 miles to the runway. Okay, we can always use progress page here if we want. You can even keep the VNav. VNav is not going to help you much at this stage, so I prefer progress page. And the other one usually stays on the legs page to check where you are going. Note that if you are going to open the chart for this approach, minimum safe altitude is 4,000 feet. So instead of descending to 3,000 feet, I'm going to descend to 4,000 feet, and I'm going to configure this airplane when we are 50 miles to the runway. So I'm going to show you that even 1,000 above from what is recommended from Boeing, you still can comply with the deceleration and be stable at 1,000 feet and complete your landing. Okay, so I'm going to descend to 4,000 feet, which is the minimum altitude for this segment, even though I would be in a radar contact, and most probably ATC would clear us to 3,000 anyway, because this approach is pretty much over the sea. Okay, we are going, by the time that we reach the land, we were going to be already inside the procedure itself. Okay, one more thing, it's winter in Keflavik right now when I'm recording this video. Temperature is below zero, so there will be the need for correcting the altitudes on this descent as well. Okay, so pretty much with these temperatures that we have in Keflavik right now, around 2 or 3 degrees below zero, we can add 10% for the heights that we have. So 3,000 will become 3,300, and 4,000 will become 4,400. But it's not a big deal today, because we are visual and we'll be over the sea all the way. Okay, if you look ahead, you're going to see that we are going to be over the sea all the way. Okay, this is normal behavior from the autopilot. We are requesting 345 knots, but this is already inside the maximum speed for the airplane, so it's maintaining the speed slightly below maximum speed to avoid the overspeed. It does this controlling the auto throttle and also the autopilot then later on during the descent. Okay, we are getting closer to our 60 miles. Okay, 73 miles right now. We see that this is approaching. If you do not have time to insert the circles and you have the correct path that you are going to follow on your arrival, you always have the distance to the runway here, so you can wait for 60 miles here and you can wait for 15 miles here to start your procedures. But if you have time to enter the circles, they help a lot, because you can check how is your descent from 60 to 15 miles, from 25,000 feet to 3,000 feet, in this case 4,000 feet minimum safe altitude in Keflavik. So here we go, 68 miles. I have some 66 knots headwind, so I'm not worried about starting the descent exactly at 60 miles. We can do it slowly, not a big issue. We do have this headwind helping us. We still cannot see Iceland ahead, maybe from outside view. Not really. That's it. This is our 777 with fire on the main deck. Okay, we are now 63 miles. As I told you, if I had a little bit of tailwind, I would start maybe the descent right now, or exactly at 60 miles, use full speed brake all the way. But in this case, I'm going to select 4,000 feet. So 4,000 feet is selected. We are at 60 miles. As you can see, I'm well above my profile, like 8,000 feet, but it's not a big deal. So when we are within the 60 miles with this headwind, it's not a big deal. I use flight level change. Now using flight level change, I'm going to judge how much I need my speed brake initially. I'm going to take my speed brake halfway and see how it's going. As you can notice, we are reaching 4,000 feet before 50 miles from now. Of course, the airplane is still accommodating, descending, speed brake extended. That's because we have a little bit of thrust, but the thrust is going down all the way to idle. Speed brake extended is not there anymore. Now throttles are on hold. Maximum indicated speed reduces as we go down, but it reaches at some point 330 knots. As you can notice, we are descending quite fast. I do not need the speed brake for now. That's why it's good to have the arcs. So this shows you how fast this airplane can descend. If you select maximum speed, idle thrust, and speed brake. Now it's getting closer to the 50 miles. I'm happy with this for now. If I do need, I extend the speed brake a little bit later. So now I'm reaching 4,000 feet close to the runway. So maybe we need a little bit of speed brake. Not much, but a little bit. Let's see how it goes like this. As the speed keeps dropping down to 330 knots. That's the maximum speed at low levels. Still a lot. I can take a little bit. Okay, speed brake. Down the tent. Remember, I want to be level around 15 miles. Ideally at 3,000 feet because of minimum safe altitude here, 4,000 feet. And I can tell you that 4,000 feet is more than enough. 50 miles with the headwind that we have is going to be more than enough for us to configure the airplane and be stable for this approach. Another thing, if the situation continues like this, we can even do an auto land. Then auto land, it will be pilot in command judgment to do it. Of course, you can only do on runways that you have an ILS. But if you notice that the system is behaving well, you can even tell ATC you are planning an auto land so they can keep everybody out of the sensitive area. Most probably at this stage, the fire trucks will be on taxiways close to the end of the runway. We are coming fast. We are coming heavy on this approach. So they will be landing, they will be expecting us to land and roll until the mid of the runway. So usually the firefighters, they are not inside the ILS protection area, so even an automatic landing can be done. Of course, depending on the situation, depending on the wind, depending on all the conditions that we can have. As I do not have a yoke today, it's going to be an automatic landing. So now we are reaching 10,000 feet. Take this time to select our lights. Remember, we keep flying. Note, we do not have the main deck is not active. Maybe we were going to have the fire coming back again as we are going down, and we have more oxygen to this airplane. One thing that I notice on the PMDG is that even though both outflow valves are fully open, the cabin rate is not as the airplane. Okay, so on the real airplane we will be descending with the same rate of the airplane because the airplane is unpressurized or almost unpressurized. We still have one pack working, the left pack is still working, but is working at a low flow, so we should be descending maybe not as fast as 2000 feet per minute, but not as low as 400 feet per minute as it is now. Okay, so we can select now our altimeter 1020, and we can do our approach checklist, which states for altimeters 1020 and 1020. So our approach checklist is complete. Now we are waiting for the 15 miles. Remember, at 15 miles I'm going to select my approach speed, which today is 152. Extend the speed brakes. Once we reach flap up speed, retract the speed brakes, and then start configuring the airplane, flaps and landing gear, and then the last step is the landing checklist. So here we are going to reach 4,000 feet before the 15 miles. Minimum altitude for SOPAR is 3,500. As I told you, we are still over the water, so in a radar environment, most probably ATC would clear us to 3,000 anyway. But I'm going to do from 4,000 to show you that it's still able. You are at maximum speed, 330 knots, 4,000 feet, 15 miles to the runway, and you are still able to configure your airplane. Even better today with 22 knots headwind, you are still capable of doing it. The runway is just ahead of us. Okay, we are reaching 15 miles. We can reduce to approach speed 152. You can extend the speed brake while you still reduce to 152. You can arm the approach mode. You are still reducing to 152. On the real airplane is much easier. So we have 152 on the speed. Approach mode. Localizer is armed. Glide slope is coming. Speed is coming. So you can start retracting the speed brakes and selecting flaps 1. Now you can select flaps, as we have flaps 1 and glide slope capture, flaps 5. Glide slope capture missed approach altitude today is 3,000 feet. And then you are going to judge. As the speed reduces to your approach speed or not, you continue extending the flaps. At some point you will select gear down flaps 20, 230 knots is maximum for flaps 15, and 225 is maximum for flaps 20. Note 22 knots headwind is more than enough for this approach. We do not really need speed brake. I'm going to arm the speed brake already for landing. Crossing 3,000 feet now. We can take gear down. Flaps 20. So right now we have the gear down and the flaps 20. We can even already select if we want our landing flaps 30. And as you can see, we were at 330 knots, 15 miles to the runway. And we are now at 2,500, 7 miles to the runway, fully configured, flaps 30, just reached now. We are on approach speed, gear down, landing checklist states for speed brake, armed, landing gear down, flaps 30, landing checklist is complete. We just need to land this airplane now. This is not over. I'm going to show you evacuation if needed after landing. So there we go. I'm going to keep an automatic land. We have rollout and flare arm, land 3. There we go. Now we are going to reach 1,000 feet. We are more than stable. So this is to show how fast you can decelerate this airplane if you are leveled. Thrust levers idle and speed brake, the airplane really decelerates. Then if you are reaching your glide path with flaps 1 or around flaps 1, you just need to configure your airplane as you do for a normal landing every day. Note that we still have fire cargo main deck ICAS message there. That means that the system is still sensing smoke on the main cargo deck. So we consider that the fire is still there. The fire is not out. 400. We already told everybody that we are going to land. Stop on the runway. 300. This is checklist incomplete normal. We don't care. We are doing paper checklist today. Minimums. Puppies, they are not calibrated with the ILS. 100. We are still on the glide slope. Perfectly there. 50. 40. 30. Flare. 20. With this headwind, I think we're going to float a little bit. Yeah. Now we touch. Speed brake up. I'm going to use full reverse. $60 knots, idle reverse, manual brakes. Idle, we can retract the speed brake, and at this stage, as we are not moving, we still have fire indication. We can even set our parking brake. Okay, so now we are going to analyze the situation. We still have the fire cargo main deck. Now we are on the ground. If we do not have any smoke or fire coming to the cockpit, maybe we have a chance now to look into the main deck cargo compartment to check. Let's assume that we go there. We do have fire, we do have a lot of smoke, so we are going to do our evacuation checklist, okay? And for the evacuation checklist, I can take this on your screen right now. So this is evacuation checklist. Condition: an evacuation is needed. So parking brake set, captain. Note that the evacuation checklist on the last column on the right tells you who is doing the action. So in this case, parking brake set, captain, and as you can notice, parking brake is set. Next step is Outflow valve switches, both manual, and this is the first officer. So the first officer goes and select both outflows to manual. Okay, we have cabin out to the auto as an indication of both outflow valves in manual. We also have the indication here on our ACAS, this M, indicating that these valves, they are both in manual right now. Next step for this is outflow valve manual switches, both holding open until outflow valve indications show fully open to depressurize the airplane is the first officer. As I look to the system, I notice that they are both open, so I don't have to do anything. If they were not fully open, I just use these two switches here to open the forward and the aft valves, okay? But they are fully open right now. Next step is fuel control switches both cut off, okay? Another thing, I'm doing the paper checklist on the evacuation, and this is a good idea even if you have the correct checklist on the airplane, because as soon as you do this step, fuel control switches, the captain, both to cut off, you will lose a lot of things, including this lower display, which is the one that you usually handle the checklist, okay? So you will not be able to continue the checklist if you were doing the checklist on the lower view. So it's a good idea to have the paper checklist, okay? So after we set fuel control switches both to cut off, we advise the cabin to evacuate. So we are going to tell the supernumeraries evacuate, evacuate, evacuate. Who does this is the captain. Then the first officer is going to advise ATC. Keflavik Tower, PMDG 777, we are evacuating on the runway. Then engine fire switches both we pull, and who does this is the FO. So the first officer will take these two fire switches and pull. Next step is also the first officer who is going to take the APU fire switch to override and pull. Okay, by override and pull, that means we need to go all the way up here, and if I just try to pull, I cannot. It doesn't come. Okay, so I need to press the switch, override and pull. Okay, so to use the APU switch, anytime that the switch is not illuminated, you cannot pull it. You need to use the override. It's the same for these switches here for the fire. Okay, we do have the buttons just below, but why those switches I was able just to pull it? Because when the engines are off, when you have the fuel control switches to cut off, these switches, they are released. Okay, so the system that prevents pulling the switches, it doesn't work when you have the fuel control switches in cut off. So that's why when you come to the checklist, evacuation checklist, one more time, for the engine fire switches it just say pull, and for the APU fire switch it says override and pull. So override and pull is the same on the 737 for the engine fire switches, but on the triple, when you have the fuel control switches in cut off, you don't need to override, you just pull. The last step is if an engine or APU fire is observed or indicated. So if it's indicated, you will have the engine or APU fire warning. Okay, if it's not indicated but is observed by somebody, maybe tower told you, maybe fire brigade told you, or maybe any occupant of the airplane saw that there is an engine on fire or there is fire near to the tail, that's a good idea maybe to use the APU fire switch. Okay, so related fire switch, you rotate to the stop and hold for 1 second, is the first officer that does it. So we do not have the indications for fire on APU or on the engine, and as we are in contact with the tower, they are looking and we do not have any fire indication near the engines or near the APU, so we do not have to do anything. So the evacuation checklist is complete. At this stage, first officer and captain, they get out of the airplane, and once they are out of the airplane, the fire brigade is close by. They have the equipment to fight the fire. Then they may use stairs to access this airplane and start fighting the fire in the main deck cargo. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this video. I talk a lot about fire cargo on the main deck. You have the checklist all the way on the left side. I show you a little bit about the system. I gave you the checklist, so this is the actual checklist and the current checklist by Boeing for fire in the main deck cargo. I also explain you what the land at an suitable airport means and what an immediate landing means. I talk to you about how we do the procedure, how we set the descent with the speed brakes, and how we set the speeds and flaps on this approach. And the last step was to show you how we do an evacuation also on the 777. So I hope you like this video. Now we have the indication that the inertial is still on, and we just have the battery. Okay, so this is something else, something related to the 777 system, but we can take the ADRU off, and as soon as the ADRU is off, we are going to have this sound off. Okay, so guys, I hope you like the video. I hope I will take the sound because it's too much. So I hope you like the video. I hope you know how to handle now a fire on the main deck cargo compartment. If you do not want to follow the current Boeing checklist, you can follow the checklist that you have on the airplane. On the electronic checklist is slightly different. There are a couple of steps that you have to do related to the trim air in the old checklist, and also the descent is not to 25,000, it's to 23,000. It doesn't really mention how far from the runway you are supposed to start configuring and reducing your airspeed. So I think the new procedure by Boeing is much better. That's why I wanted to show you, and also I want to show everybody how this airplane is capable of reducing speed. Of course, today headwind helped a lot, but you notice that I barely used the speed brake on the descent from 25,000 to 4,000 feet, and I didn't use the speed brake once we were approaching flap up speed. And on this airplane you can use all the way down to flaps 30, is not an issue, as long as you do not use below 1,000 feet. Okay, so thank you so much. It was 1 hour and 45 minutes of information about main deck cargo fire. Couple of issues that we found on PMDG. I hope somebody from PMDG watched this video and try to fix those small issues with the cabin altitude auto that is not canceling, and I hope that in the future PMDG have an upgrade from Boeing, an update from Boeing, and can use the new checklist for this figure as well. Okay, thank you so much guys, and I see you next time. Happy New Year to everybody. Bye bye.